They say when you wear Black Power Media gear, you can accomplish anything. You play any and every position. Coaching, to kicking, to receiving, to running and juking. And, oh my goodness, I see that again in slow motion. Get off me. And you're going to have a lot of haters coming at you, but what you got to do is you got to shake them off, and get to your goal and accomplish it. And when that's done, it's a beautiful thing. I'm talking about going hard, extra, for that extra point. And when it's done beautifully, you talking about touchdown. Oh, and the crowd goes wild and they're celebrating with you and everything. Man, let's see that again. Nice.
Black Power Media, baby. That's how we do it.
Now go to blackpowermedia.org and get you some of that gear. Empower yourself today. Yeah.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
All right, what's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like right here, Black Power Media. Greetings, everybody. I am Jared Ball, very happy to be your host. Once again, back to continue our conversation with Brother Dhoruba about his take, not per se on the series, but on questions I'm going to ask him pertaining to the New York 21, the Black Panther Party, the surrounding politics of the time, which do make albeit a reduced and ever decreasing, as I somewhat predicting, role in this series in episode 3. And then there's some others, depending on how this goes, how much time we have. I have a number of responses to my comrades who had their criticisms of me and us that maybe I'll work in, or I'll just do that separately another time. I will say, as I shared with them on Facebook, I went back and did my homework. I watched the initial interview with Dhoruba. Went back and reviewed some more of the series, including twice now, the 3rd episode. And I'm more convinced than I was initially that I and Dhoruba were on the right track. And so, we'll continue the conversation. I look forward to it. So, that said, please do like, share, subscribe, join the platform if you can. Put this in your socials, invite others to join you if you're here live, invite others to check it out with you if you see this post live. And shout out to Warrior Class and everybody else and Jackie's show from last night, all of the great stuff that's happening on the platform. Please check it all out. So, all right, that said, we all know what we all, we know what it is. Dhoruba Bin-Wahad, longtime activist, political prisoner, Black Panther Party, Black Liberation Army. And by the way, because I think some of the criticism and there was some of the confusion, I think, is because people were not familiar enough with what I think this has to be understood as a series of conversations between me and Dhoruba, between Dhoruba and our platform and my comrades on the platform and Dhoruba's work just in general. We can't just take one video discussion and have that be what folks consider to be the entire body of work, obviously. So Dhoruba, it's always good to see you. Welcome back to the platform. I know we got a little bit of an issue, at least on my end, where I hear an echo. So what we're going to do is we're going to work it out so that I'm going to stop talking, unmute you, and then I won't hear the echo, and then we'll go from there. But it's always good to see you. Welcome back. I'm back.
Okay, thank you for having me back, Jared.
So there's a number of things that I would like, but so what I wanted to do, there's a number of things I'd like to do. So, but what one thing I would like to start with, actually, what I'd like to start with is in this 3rd episode. So I'm going to go out of order, admittedly, because there's something I'm very eager to get to. In the 3rd episode of the series, much more of it is about Tupac himself than it is about Afeni or the Black Panther Party. And I have a whole bunch of issues to raise with you about a number of different things, but I admittedly want to start with where they somewhat I don't know, somewhere in the middle beginning of the episode. They discuss a point in time where Afeni and Joan Bird show up during the Panther 21 trial and realize that their male comrades have, in their words, absconded. And Afeni's sister is narrating a portion of this section and says that Afeni had been betrayed unlike any other time, beyond imagination, any other time in her life, as her comrades, Sedawayo, Jamal Joseph, all breaking camp and then leaving Afeni and Joan to be remanded, have their bail overturned and then remanded. They go to prison, and then it's left there. And then because she appears as a pundit in this series episode, Jasmine Guy, I went back to Jasmine Guy's book, co-written in partnership with Afeni, and in there it's described even more harshly in terms of this betrayal. So my first question is, obviously what happened there, but my real question is, what was the protocol? Because another part of that, they're talking about when Joan is captured, and I think Kwesi and Sekou had left, and it was the idea, again, it's kind of left out there both in the series and in terms of Jasmine Guy's book, that the men left the sisters to be. So again, what really happened? And then my specific question is, what was the protocol in advance, or was there a protocol in advance? That is, if the police are coming, we're all breaking and everybody's for themselves. Was there, was any of that discussed in terms of preparation? And then obviously in terms of the decision to leave, feeling like there was no hope in the trial. What happened there, and what does the video or the series get right or wrong, as I've at least related to you?
Well, first of all, Jared, I'm glad you asked that question. There's a lot of things that people don't know about that happened then. Some of us who are still alive, I think there's a few, we might try to present this in a diplomatic way so that we won't injure anybody's feelings and emotions about people. But you know me, Jared, I'm not with that. The fact of the matter is that before first of all, we have to understand that the counterintelligence program had been working overtime to separate the New York Panther Party and the leadership of the local Panther Party chapters around the country from the national leadership. They have been working overtime to undermine Huey P. Newton and the leadership in the Black Panther Party, and to a certain degree that work was successful. And it created an imagination of the West Coast, especially Huey and David and them, that somehow Sedawayo, myself, and Jamal, the Panther 21, who were out on bail, threatened or undermine their authority and credibility because of the influence that the Panther 21 had, especially on the East Coast, with supporters and members of the party. The Panther 21 Defense Committee generated a lot of money, and people don't understand the time level, the time line in all of this. When the Panther 21 were arrested in April, I believe it was April 2nd, April 1st, in 1971 or 1970. We were all living separately in different apartments with our mates or fiancés or whatever. We were not all living in a Panther pad, a Panther apartment where we were all located and everything. And we were taken in separately. We were arraigned and held on a $100,000 bond, and we were separated and scattered throughout New York City into different facilities. Okay, none of us were allowed to be in the same facility at the same place at the same time. So our lawyers had to file a number of motions and stuff in order to just have us come together for a legal visit. And the reason why I'm going into this background is for you to understand that the Panther 21, when they were in prison, was the premier conspiracy case of that time before the Chicago 7. And that both Bill Kunstler and Gerald Lefcourt, Robert Bloom, Carol Lefcourt, and others were heavily involved in this case, and they had organized and formed what they called the Law Commune. This was a collective of radical lawyers, okay? And they were non-affiliated. Some of them were members of the National Lawyers Guild, but most of them were young radical lawyers, okay? And my lawyer initially in the Panther 21 case was William Kunstler, but he had to leave because of the Chicago indictment. I'm sorry, can you hear me? He had to leave because of the Chicago indictment. And so Gerald Lefcourt took over my particular representation. Now, from the very beginning, the Panther 21 and the 13 of us that were on trial, all 21 members of the Panther 21 weren't on trial together at the same time. In fact, Jamal Joseph and Shaba Om never went to trial. And because they were adolescents, they were considered adolescents, they were considered underage. And so when we were arrested and confined in New York and held in a $100,000 bond, you know, the Panther 21 conspiracy case became a cause célèbre in New York. The right wing, the so-called media, portrayed us as communists, as radicals, as undermining U.S. democracy, working with Fidel Castro in Cuba. I mean, you can go to the news clippings and see that they have editorials that Cuba helped Panthers proud, you know, and all of this stuff. Now, you got to remember, COINTELPRO is constantly trying to undermine our relationship to the national office, to the national leadership. And so they're sending letters back and forth to Huey talking about how the Panther 21 in prison are challenging his leadership, that they believe that he's stealing money that the West Coast is stealing money from the Panther 21 Defense Committee and it's undermining their ability to raise bail, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we're out on bail, okay? And I'm trying to prevail, and Sedawayo's trying to prevail on the brothers and sisters that's in prison to tone it down and let us try to handle this in a principled and political way organizationally. That we have to challenge Huey Newton and the Central Committee because they're not at all reflecting the principles of democratic centralism that the party was founded on. In that all of the leadership, national leadership of the Black Panther Party was on the West Coast and came from Oakland. Regardless of the chapter, regardless of the circumstances in each particular venue or urban area. Now, I want to point out, too, that when the Black Panther Party spread in the United States, that the majority of leaders in the local chapters and branches of the Black Panther Party were activists before they joined the party. They were activists, well-known activists in their own local locality. And so when they joined the party, they became, whether it was a Fred Hampton, whether it was the leadership in Boston, whether it was the leadership in New York, they became the first cadre or the main cadre of the Black Panther Party from Oakland, California. They're the ones that they relied on. David Hilliard called me whenever there was an issue with anything happening with people who visited the West Coast or Panthers on the East Coast. This was before the 21. We organized the security section in the Harlem chapter of the Black Panther Party under the direction of the Central Committee. It was organized. So everything that we did had a protocol, Jared. That's my point. And when we went on trial, it was understood that we were not going to passively attend this trial, that we were going to put the state on trial, that we were going to show how the state and the government had went after black radicals and black power advocates, and that this conspiracy indictment was a long part of that, was a part of that process, of that entire process. And so we had an attitude in court where whenever we felt it was necessary, we would stop the proceedings. We would tear up the courtroom. okay, whenever we felt we were being unjustly treated. And on one occasion, Judge John Murtaugh said that he was not going to reconvene the trial until we wrote a letter of apology saying that we would not disrupt the courtroom again. And so instead of writing a letter of apology, we wrote a historical memorandum on black people in America. And we had it read on the tape recorder to the judge. So the judge realized that he wasn't going to break us, that we wasn't going to give in, so he reconvened. And he warned us that in the next disruption, all of the defendants in the courtroom, you understand, including those on bail, would be banned from the courtroom, and the trial would be held, in camera behind closed doors in public. So he threatened us. And at this time that he threatened us, Lumumba Shakur, and I got to say all of this because people are acting stupid, like they were there, like they don't know what's taking place. They don't know, and this is one of the reasons why I told you I didn't want to see the movie. The reason why I didn't want to see the movie is, and I call it a movie, not a documentary. The reason why I wanted to see the movie, didn't want to see the movie, because I didn't want to respond to people's iconic perceptions of historical figures that they had built up in their heads, and now I got to answer all of their, I got to be the one to smash the clay feet of their idols. I'm not the one. I'm not trying to do that. If you notice, Jared, I never came on any of these programs browbeating and talking about people in a negative way historically, although I had feelings and I was there with them. You see? I would try to keep things in a political, ideological, or dialectical context so that we would understand the historical moment. And if you remember on my last time on the program, I said that it's very difficult for revolutionaries to process defeat, and that we all process this defeat differently. And that Afeni may have processed this defeat, given her personality and given who she was, quite differently than I did, or say Jamal Joseph did, okay? And one of the results of her processing this thing was perhaps an emotional and psychological breakdown that led to her addiction. I'm not saying that there was, but I'm saying that's a strong possibility. It's an indication, knowing her personality personally, that I think that's what happened.
She seems to more or less say that in
the Jasmine Guy book, by the way, just very quickly.
Yeah. So I'm saying, but this is just my understanding of how, a lot of us process it, because we talked about this after we got out of prison and how we dealt with these things. But just to clarify, when John Murtaugh said that he was going to reincarcerate everybody if we disrupted the courtroom, that meant that all of us had to be on the same page in terms of party discipline and in terms of decorum in the courtroom and how we was going to proceed. Okay? And if you noticed, I indicated before that with Afeni, we all made a decision that the sisters would be bailed out first. Okay, because we felt that was better for our public profile. We felt that Afeni had these people skills and could and therefore could communicate with folks in a way that I couldn't, or other Panther members couldn't. And so that's that. So we made a conscious decision to have her bailed out first. Okay, and then Joan. People conflate what happened, and I don't want to sidetrack, but people conflate what happened with Joan Bird and Sekou Odinga and Lumumba and all of them up at Ellesmere Tennis Association and the police encounter up in Upper Manhattan, okay, which was part of the indictment, in which Sekou was accused of ambushing or conducting an ambush or military operation against the precinct police station up in Uptown Harlem, and things went awry, and Joan Bird was captured at the scene. And Joan Bird was tortured, she was beaten, she was hung out the window at the precinct, she was brutalized by the NYPD, and this was before the Panther 21 indictment, okay? Joan Bird was eventually released on bond, and we got behind her defense, and then the Panther 21 indictment hit. And Joan Bird was included in that indictment, and that overt actions that were in the indictment. And the reason why I point that out is because people think that Joan Bird was just this sister you understand, who was abandoned by all the men in the party, you understand, to her fate. This is Afeni, how Afeni characterized that bullshit in her book. To her fate. Afeni was part and parcel of our preparation in case things went south in the Panther 21 trial, to do everything with us. She made a decision that she didn't want to make a move. She made that decision. We didn't force it on her. We didn't tell her, that you can't do this or you can't do that. She was privy to everything. So was Joan Bird. And Joan Bird chose not to participate because Joan came from a middle-class black family. This was totally unfamiliar territory to Joan, you see, and she was uncertain about that. So she wanted to just, try to deal with the case, and hopefully its outcome would be successful. Now, I want to point out too that when we absconded from the trial, it was because the FBI had been very effective in convincing Huey P. Newton that we were going to assassinate him when he came on the East Coast to do a speaking tour. And I was in charge of his security on the East Coast. Myself, Abdul Majid, and some other folks were in charge of his security when he landed and he came on the East Coast. Huey Newton believed these allegations, and so when he came to New York, he changed his security detail and brought brothers and sisters from Boston and from Philly, I believe, to handle his detail, and sat us down, And Robert Webb, who was murdered was in that detail. Abdul Majid, who died in prison, was in that detail. James York, Bashir Hamid was in that detail. I was in charge of that detail. And so it was at this crucial moment that Huey felt paranoid, that the New York party was going to assassinate him. They were going to do some bodily harm to him. And so he took preemptive measures to make sure that that didn't happen. And one of the preemptive measures was that he had put a hit on myself and Sethawale and Jamal. That's what he did. And we found out about that because Sethawale had a shotgun marriage to Huey P. Newton's secretary. What was her name? She was from Jamaica, and she didn't have citizenship, but she was Huey Newton's secretary, and she signed all the checks from the Panther 21 committee. Huey would never put his name on a check, and she would sign all of the checks and all of this stuff. And she would, and in order to ensure that she wouldn't be deported early on, Huey had Sethawale marry her in a public ceremony, and it was on the front page of the Panther 21, the New York, of the Panther newspaper, was Sethawale revolutionary marriage, and Sethawale's wife or girlfriend, Rosalind Bennett, who was pregnant, who was 7 months pregnant with Sethawale's child. She saw this newspaper article, and she went ballistic. And she called up the national headquarters and threatened Elaine, and threatened the sister who married Huey, and threatened her. And the FBI had recorded this threat. Okay, and they used that threat to manufacture an attempted assassination or assassination plot on Huey P. Newton, saying that he wasn't welcome in New York, that he would be assassinated, et cetera, et cetera. And so it was through Huey Newton's secretary, who was married to Sethawale, that we learned of Huey Newton intending to assassinate those of us who he believed were out to get him, namely myself, Sethawale, and Jamal. Of course, we had no such intentions. We have sat down and we had always maintained that the Black Panther Party, even during the split, would not, harm a hair on Huey's head or any of the black leadership, because that has been the malaise of our struggles for freedom for decades. That we kill our own leaders, that we turn on our own, and we were determined not to do that. So that gave Huey a carte blanche as far as we were concerned, because he had no such inhibitions under the he was drugged out on cocaine, thanks to some of his compatriots like Elaine Brown and all of them, and so Huey saw us as a threat. He saw the Panther 21 as undermining his political authority from prison, because the Panther 21 were very well known. And so the Panther 21 decided to write this letter, and you could read it. It's a public record. And this letter was to be released in this radical newspaper called the East Village Other. And I saw the letter in its draft form, and I advised Lumumba and the brothers in the joint not to do this. I said, you shouldn't do this. We're almost home with Huey and them about expanding the Central Committee to include members and from other chapters, and one of those to be included was Fred Hampton. And people don't know that, but Fred Hampton was one of the potential members that were to be included in the Central Committee, and other members in other chapters, okay? This was right before he was marked for assassination. So what happened was, when the only time that we had to try to avoid this calamity was during the Easter break, in which the Panther 21 trial would be out for about 4 or 5 days during this Easter break. We were always off on Fridays, and then Monday, Sunday. So it was Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday gave us 4 days. So it gave us 4 days to put into motion our plan to go underground without the state recognizing that we were gone. So we told Afeni this, that these people were coming, that she wasn't one of the people that were named on Huey's hit list, okay, because she had managed to, develop somewhat of a amenable relationship with certain characters from the West Coast. And so she didn't want to go. And so we said to her that, you're going to be in danger, because if we split, the judge said he's going to remand everybody. So what are you going to do? She said, well, I just have to deal with that. And I asked her why. We had the connections in Canada to get us to Africa. We had the whole network hooked up. So it wasn't a question of, it was just a question of, initiating what we had all agreed on. And she said that she didn't want to do it, that she had more at stake here in New York. She wanted to tough it out, okay? And so that's what she did, Now, if you ask me why she did that, why she made that decision, I could tell you what she indicated to me. But if that means that I'm inside of her head and I knew everything that she was thinking at that time, no, I don't. But I know what she indicated to me and what the situation was. And that's, Jared, is why I was speaking about that. And that's one of the reasons why you see I wasn't in her book. And if you notice, she's also very negative.
You were in the book. I
was the bad guy. But okay, cool. I was, that's cool. That I'm used to that. It's all good. I've been, it's all good, man. I'm that guy.
I just point that out. I mean, because again, in the series, and this is why, to me, talking to you about the Panther 21 in the context of how they're referenced in this series is more important to me than whether or not you see the series and comment directly on it. Because, for instance, again, and someone sent this to me. I didn't get a chance to verify this, but I trust the source, but I at least want to clarify that in advance, that this FX series is now the biggest thing that FX has ever done. It's already broken all of their records. So I want, and because of that sort of reverberation, even if that's not fully the case, when you see Afeni's sister, really, I mean, it's a highlighted moment where she says, this is the greatest betrayal that Afeni didn't know, that Joan didn't know. They showed up that day and the men are gone. and they're locked up, and they had no idea that. And Jamal is even on there saying, Jamal Joseph, you hear him saying, the decision had been made for us to run, but somehow Afeni didn't get the message, and we didn't know that. We didn't know that.
Well, that's Jamal. That's Jamal. You know, that's Jamal trying to put the best construction on shit. You know, I'm a little more blunt than Jamal. She didn't want to go. She wasn't down. She was in an affair with someone that she had met, and she felt that affair was important to her in her life at that particular juncture. And I wasn't going to try to make her go. What was I supposed to do? Drag her with us? You see? But I know goddamn well I wasn't going to allow these pigs and the FBI to murder my ass. I know that. And so Afeni, if she didn't want to go, adios amigos, I'll holler at you later. You see? See you, didn't want to be you.
Sorry, go ahead.
And so that's what I'm saying. And because I never spoke about this, because I never, said anything about this, people assume that what she said was true, and it wasn't. And people would assume that I mean, when you look at the interviews of Jamal and Shaba, these interviews were done years ago, and they were done in a different format. I appreciate that, sister. Thank you. They were done in a different format for a different purpose. Now, these interviews was taken and put in this documentary in order to deal with, with the subject matter of the Black Panther Party. If you notice that Jamal was talking about his expectations when he went into the party, his expectations that he would be given a gun and all of this stuff, and that might have been a little bit of hyperbole on the part of Jamal. You see what I'm saying? I don't know. Maybe that was intentional and maybe it wasn't. But I know that was bullshit. You see? And when people say that, that when I explain to folks that that we came to the party, many of us from different experiences and from different backgrounds and from different classes and from different family relationships, it's just how we came to the party. And so when I came to the party, I didn't come to the party to serve breakfast to school children. That wasn't why I joined the party. Now, during the course of the struggle, you understand, understanding the importance of providing some type of services to our people in order to educate them and bring them to a different level. Of course, that advanced my political education, and I'm down with the breakfast program. You see, but that's not why I joined. And people try to conflate this to mean that, that I was just on some adventuristic and I was on some gangster shit, like this knucklehead that wrote talking about if it wasn't, that I probably would have wound up being a thug if it wasn't this and it wasn't that. And he's probably right. If it wasn't for the Black Panther Party, I think a lot of us would have wound up not being who we was. I probably would have wound up putting my foot in his ass, as one of them bootlicking Negroes out there. But that's another story. That's another case.
So if I can, let me ask you, there's a couple other things specific to what was said in this or not said in this series that I just want to ask in this episode, because there really wasn't that much, because there's at least 2 points that I think are made in this episode that confirm things that you said in our first discussion that I think is important to highlight. So, for instance, I think if people were uncomfortable with what you said about Afeni and the questions around the father of her child in our first discussion, then in episode 3 they must be furious. Because in episode 3, there is far more egregious and I think even disrespectful, including in the mouth of her own sister, a discussion of Afeni's sex life and what she did and didn't know about who the father was. And her sister goes so far, something you never endeavored to speculate on, says that when there was confusion as to who the father was, her sister actually says that the sister would have preferred it to be the brother Leg Saunders, who was running dope for Nikki Barnes, apparently, because she liked the idea that the father of her child would be a thug and a gangster, as opposed to who it turned out apparently to be an actual member of the Black Panther Party. But so they go far more into all of that sort of salaciousness than anything else, and then even do a funny kind of production thing by narrating and editing over what would have been the interview with Pac's father to sort of downplay and almost kind of disrespect his involvement was very interesting. So that was one thing. The other thing that I thought was interesting that you sort of predicted or were critical of, and this is where even I disagree with you, is that, but the series does agree with you, that Pac was not serious politically. That in this episode, in a number of different people's narrations, whether it's Watani Tayemba at one point or someone else, they really do kind of make it seem like, look, Pac was kind of play acting, and then he took the role of the of the thug and the radical, and it went too far for him. But that really wasn't him, and they even allude to this kind of contradicting the first one. Kind of the way they display it, as if to say that his sort of toying around with it, you know, Watani kind of point, I don't remember ever hearing this before, says that when Pac is shot 5 times in Quad Studios, that infamous evening in 94, I believe, one of the shots, the one that goes into his groin, was self-inflicted because he was carrying a gun, a handgun that doesn't apparently have a safety on it. I don't know anything about it. So in an attempt to defend himself, quickly pulling it out, he shot himself. But my point is, it's kind of left in this thing that Pac was just sort of floating around, and again, kind of play. They even kind of say play acting. So I thought it was interesting. Again, that's not my preferred version of it, but that those were at least 2 things that in this episode that you had said previously were likely to be the case are seeming to play out here in this. So I don't know if there's anything in any of that you wanted to respond to in particular, but I did want to at least note that.
Well, no, not really, because like I said to you before when you asked me to come on, you know, that I said I wasn't going to see the movie because I didn't want to respond to people's perceptions. You know, Tupac was not someone that I had a personal relationship with. And people conflate things like this. You see, I didn't know Tupac. I knew his mother, okay, and the circumstances under which he was born. And I know episodes during the period of his life where Afeni's actions, you know, were basically the actions of a crackhead, and that's it, you know. Of course, that don't take away or negate her commitment to the movement or to her sincerity when she was an activist in the Black Panther Party. Like I said, we all process that defeat differently, you know. But what I really want to say though is that of what Afeni went through in terms of her emotional and psychological trauma and problems and addiction occurred, you know, 10, 12 years before Tupac. We're talking about, this didn't all occur at the same time. Sometimes people think that what Afeni was going through psychologically and mentally with drug addiction and all of this stuff, that Tupac was at the same time wrestling with his creative genius and he was going through being identified. It's not true. And we have to understand too, as human beings, what would you think if you were the leading defendant on one of the most notorious conspiracy cases of the mid-late 20th century against the Black movement, and you're the leading case, and your name is Shakur, and there next to you is your wife, Afeni Shakur, and you've been in prison for a year and a half or whatever the case may be, and she's pregnant, and you have absolutely nothing to do with it, and you're on trial every day with these reporters. How do you think Lumumba reacted, given his nature? And none of y'all know Lumumba. There's only a few people out here that know Lumumba. You see, I could count them on one hand that's still alive. Okay? And some of them grew up with him. You see? So you could imagine how the male ego in this situation, especially when I indicated to you one of the things when I first met Afeni and Lumumba introduced me to her, I could see that he was very proud and braggadocious about her demeanor, her physical demeanor. You know, she had short hair, she had a bald head, she wasn't the stereotype of black woman, she was dark skinned. You see what I'm saying? And she spoke very clearly. You see what I'm saying? She was no punk, you know, and she wasn't, you know, none of these things. These were all things that revolutionary men were idealizing at that time, you see, in black women. So I could understand Lumumba's attraction to her and perhaps his love for her and her love for him. I'm not denigrating any of that. I wasn't in the relationship. I'm not judging the quality of that relationship, but I do know Lumumba, and I did know her, and I do know Lumumba's ego. And Lumumba was a type of individual that he did what he said he would do, he did. He was a man of his word. If Lumumba said he was going to do X, you could basically bet that he would do X. You see what I'm saying? So when Lumumba brought the sister on the scene and put her in the central part of his life, I have to believe that Lumumba was serious about how he saw this woman and how he figured her to be his, quote, second or third wife. You see? So how that turned out, what happened with all of that, perhaps, you know, is a subject for another book. For some other
Afeni's recollection of that in Jasmine Guy's book is you know, I think it's meant for us to take it as a little bit of humor in the self-criticism. She was very self-critical of her own role and her own arrogance and is her word in that book and then she's extremely very self-critical in terms of the impact it had on Lumumba's first wife. Absolutely. None of this is in the series, but that she did. That was
and I'm gonna be honest with you. It was the way his first wife was treated because of her that really, really made me sort of alienated towards her and believe and seeing her opportunism. Because that opportunism destroyed that woman in that relationship. And it didn't have to. And that sister didn't deserve it. You see? And that was all part of her opportunism, in my view, and Lumumba's ego. You see? And these are unfortunate circumstances. I'm quite sure people could say the same shit about me on some level, if you know, in relationships or you or whatever. I don't know. But I'm just saying that what I saw.
Oh, no. Speak for yourself. All of my relationships have gone perfectly. No, look, in all seriousness, I mean, I'm watching, and I don't mean to like, I'm extremely. No, I mean, but I am extremely sensitive to the fact that all of this is happening. And this was something that I did like about this episode. Because again, I want to say whatever I'm critical of politically is overdone. It's done. My negative criticism of the series is outdone by its quality of presentation. It is a monster. And when there's a part, and I'm going to tell you, this is the best part. There's a part. But anyway, but my point is, I'm very sensitive to the fact that all of these stories that we're being told in this series and what you're recounting, for the most part, is happening among people who are very young, who are fighting the. My man and I were talking about, there was a couple years ago. We were both happened to be commuting home from Morgan State on the Baltimore Beltway, and we're coming home, and one half of the Beltway had been cut off because they were paying tribute to a fallen officer, an officer killed in duty or something like that. And the amount of force it took over the entire highway. Helicopters, militarized vehicles. My point in all this is that our joke was, and somewhat still is, I give a lot of leeway to people like you and others, because we were thinking, imagine if that was just for a funeral. Imagine if that had been mobilized to get me, to get us. Like that was mobilized against you, against Afeni, against the people we're all talking about. And when I think about that, it is very humbling. And we have to think like, okay, whatever the critics, whatever, all of this is happening to very young people who are addressing themselves against the most powerful hostile state in world history. So that was one thing. But there's one part in this thing where they spliced together Afeni's statement in her final statement to the court, to the judge, and Pac's final statement to the judge in his New York trial for I think this was for the rape charge. And they splice it going back and forth with commentary from loved ones talking about the two people making these comments, and they're almost identical in terms of the way they were delivered, with power and strength and commitment, and all saying the same thing. We know you've already just, like Pac opens up and says to the judge, "You have never even looked at me and my lawyer in the eye." Afeni is saying, "I know you've already predetermined all of this." So, it's a very powerful moment. My point is, this is a very well presented piece. Anyway, I don't even remember where I was going with that. But I just wanted to point that out to say, anyway. Yeah, go ahead.
The problem with stealth history.
Mm-hmm.
You see, stealth history is a rewriting of historical facts and events in a way that positions people in the present to accept their position and move forward from that position and create a future accordingly. So those who write the history of the past, his story, determine what the presence is, and that determines, in fact, how we go to the future. Now, what you just pointed out, juxtaposing Tupac's case, a rape case, a totally apolitical case, okay, in which Tupac is accused at the beginning of his notoriety as a rapper, in which he's accused of raping a young woman, and that he claims, was mutual consent and all of these things.
No. In fact, they lay it out here, just to be clear. And I actually believe him on this, that and this is where we disagree, and where I think, so when the series talks about Media Pennsylvania, the exposure by those white activists of the COINTELPRO documents and all of that, where I would like to see even you maybe consider is how the exposure of COINTELPRO does get extended to Pac. And I know for you, I understand why it would sound crazy to you, but I think that there is more of a continuity there than certainly the series does. And that
No, don't get twisted, Jared.
But I want to say, let me just clarify this one point, just so we're clear. The series starts talking about the character of Haitian Jack, and this is why I was trying to make those preceding comments, because Haitian Jack figures pretty prominently in this sort of shady agent type thing. He's the one that gets the young woman back to the hotel room. Pac goes to sleep or passes out. Haitian Jack and his boys abuse this woman and then leave. Pac is awakened. He and his main boy, who also had nothing to do with this, are themselves with Haitian Jack arrested. And then Jack is separated. In this part of the series mentions this, and but of course they can't raise the next level of questions as to why Jack's, at least maybe they'll build to that in the next two episodes, but Jack's case is separated. And then he has, as they do mention, a laundry list of accusations and charges that never land him in prison, never land him locked up. He's separated. He walks out. Pac gets locked up. His boy gets another charge. I forgot exactly what happens to him, but Pac gets locked up. So I understand what you're saying, but I just wanted to clarify. I just wanted to clarify at least that part, so that when you make the point I think you want to make, you at least have that.
Let me bring something home here. First of all, The counterintelligence program said what in the beginning? That we have to convince black youth that it's better to be an entertainer, a sports figure, someone who's revered and revered by white society than a revolutionary. Because to be a revolutionary is to be a dead revolutionary. That's one of the earlier memos in the COINTELPRO, right? And we see that further on down the line, that when we get to by 1969, 1970, over 70% of the counterintelligence operations are against the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Movement. The majority of these are against the Black movement, okay, and particularly the Black Panther Party. All right, and so why would we think that COINTELPRO stopped with the Church Commission, when in fact, you know from interviewing Orasani Burton, how COINTELPRO proceeded under PRICE Act, Prison Activist Program, how it proceeded under Chesamard robberies, how it proceeded under New Kill, how it proceeded under the guise of a whole lot of different programs and names that had absolutely nothing initially to do with destruction of the Black Panther Party or Black militant organization. So it's not unreasonable or illogical to realize that Tupac, who was becoming sort of like a spokesperson, an artist that was revered by his generation, a generation that grew up listening to his music. Here was a kid that came out of a family that had politics, that had involvement in the movement, you know, whose mother was a prominent figure in that movement, you see. And here he comes along talking, you know, I mean, if you look at the lyrics to most of his songs, none of them were really that politically revolutionary at all, you see. And but they were they had the insurgent characteristics of anti-authoritarianism. None of his songs, you know, or his music, you know, still hating police, still wearing my khakis with a crease. You see what I'm saying? You know, Popo didn't want to hear that shit. You see, look at your homeboy Ice-T now, who plays a cop all the time. I mean, this dude got a whole reputation on TV as a cop. He put out a song called talking about to kill a cop or whatever, and the PBA, cop killer, and the police unions made him swallow that song, literally. Made him open his mouth, say and shove it down your throat.
But just again, to be fair, we got to remember though, Pac, beyond the lyrics, in interviews, he gave a political analysis these other rappers wouldn't give. He did try to reconcile gangs and bring gangs together. He did try. Even when I remember seeing him say he was going to bring Snoop and his friends. They were going to give free concerts in the hood and have that money turn and raise money and give it back to the people like that. Those are little things that start to point that as a 25-year-old man that's old maybe in terms of your generation's level of struggle, but is pointing him in a trajectory that where one of his former lawyers who is pictured in this series but not referenced or heard from, Michael Tarif Warren. I don't know if you know what your relationship is with him. I don't remember. But he said he believed Pac was assassinated and was on his way to becoming a Malcolm X style figure. So
well, I agree.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah,
I'm saying, you know, I could understand how Tarif could say that, you know, and Tarif had, you know, he knew Tupac much better than I did because he had a legal and a personal relationship with them fighting their trial. And, you know, I have an enormous amount of respect for Tarif Warren. He's one of the people's attorneys, you know, which we don't have too many of, if any, right now. And so, you know, I'm not going to second guess that, but I would say, or naysay that. I would say though, in dealing with that obviously Tupac grew up as a sensitive young man with creative skills and talent in an environment that was completely different than most of the rappers that grew up that he became associated with, which also lent itself to him role playing the way he did. You see, a lot of us role play when we grow up, you know, in order to fit in order to have friends, in order to be accepted. You see, and I don't think that we should suspend that with Tupac, but you're absolutely right. A lot of his interviews did indicate a level of political consciousness and awareness that he tried to, I think, take to another level when he tried to write down the protocol or the rules of the thug life, which was basically a repudiation of what the U.S. government had did to gangs in the 60s and 70s. Right. You know, if we look at the history of the Crips and we look at the history of the Bloods, the way the leadership, the initial leadership of those gangs was eliminated was to bring up a criminal element in these gangs that would not emulate any of the characteristics of the Black Panther Party, who relied on that same class of young Black men and women for its membership. You got to remember the Black Panther Party had a class analysis, and its class basis, the basis for its class analysis that it believed the most revolutionary class was the lumpen proletariat, okay? The unemployed, those who would rather punch a cracker in the face than punch his time clock. You see, and that's one of the reasons why you see the Battle of Algiers was shown in the Panther 21 trial, because it was to show how so-called apolitical criminals, if they take up the cause of their people, they will be the most resilient and combative revolutionaries on the battlefield. They would be the most uncompromising fighters on the battlefield, and they would be the ones that knew the police and understood the police as the type of criminals and bullies and torturers that they were. Okay, so it's not unusual for Tupac, who grew up with his mama in that environment, to understand that the police, you know, were these terrorists in blue costumes, and I think he pointed out to occasions where he was brutalized by the police.
Absolutely.
You see? Yeah. So it's not far-fetched to see how Tupac, as opposed to a Dr. Dre, as opposed to a Snoop Dogg, would have a different take on what rap music represented to him in his generation, given the fact that he was basically at heart a poet.
Yeah,
I mean, he was a poet, and I don't say that to mean that, you know, that was the sum total of who he was. I'm just saying he had a sense of lyricism in his existence. He understood how to put words together to describe a situation that many people would be lost for words to describe or cut to the chase. And I think that was the importance of him to his generation, that he was able to say these things and they cut right to the meat of his generation and how they were feeling, you know. Now, the fact that he was hooked up with a piece of shit like Suge Knight and them knuckleheads on the West Coast, you understand, you know, didn't forbode welfare.
Right.
You know, and that's where I think he was in over his head. He didn't.
Now they do at one point. I kind of laughed to myself when I saw this on the screen, because I was like, they're trying to mess with Dhoruba. But there is a part where they if I remember correctly, they sort of blend in the screen the phrase from the COINTELPRO document saying that to prevent the rise of a Black Messiah, and they sort of make the point that this was what, and I actually agree with this point. So I was impressed that it showed up on screen at all, but I know that I didn't think that you might appreciate it so much, that they suggest that Pac was that next Black Messiah that was going to electrify the Black nationalist movement, et cetera, and so forth. But and I do think that there would have been potential for that.
He may well have been. That may have well been a possibility. Yeah. Except we know what happened. We know what happened to hip hop and rap music.
Well, yeah,
we know what happened to that. We know what happened to that genre. So we know that whoever came up. Well, I'm just saying.
No, I'm with you on that. So A couple other things. Now, you mentioned in our last discussion, you mentioned, if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Yedwa Sudan, and he and Gene Roberts are brought up, and there is a sort of it is a beautiful moment to see more discussion of that history where Afeni basically exposes Sudan on the stand as a fraud and the snitch that he was, et cetera, and so forth. But I did want to ask you if there was anything else that you would want to share with us about what all that was like in the involvement of a Gene Roberts, who, of course, as the series reminds us, was and they profoundly say that the last breath Malcolm took was forced into him by a snitch, mouth to mouth with Gene Roberts, and then here he comes back into the Panthers later on to try to be similarly disruptive, and then Sudan being sort of put on trial by Afeni is a kind of a highlight of this episode. So I did want to ask you about those two figures, if you wanted to.
Well, I think Afeni. I think 1 second, please. One second.
No worries. And we can just remind folks, just take this moment to remind folks to go ahead and hit the like button, share, subscribe, join, invite others, put this in your socials, support blackpowermedia.org, where, by the way, one of the things that we have at the donation page there, which you can find at blackpowermedia.org, again, is a portal on. Of course, you can support us via Patreon, but we also are collecting for Panther veterans and political prisoners. So you can jump on that as well. But anyway, Dhoruba, if you're back, I was asking about Gene Roberts and Yedwa Sudan.
Well, I think Afeni, I think our decision as a collective to allow Afeni to take a more prominent role in the trial as a woman and as an activist was a very good strategy. I think it worked very well. Joan Bird, on the other hand, she had an attorney, but Joan Bird had a different type of demeanor than Afeni did, and therefore she probably wouldn't have been effective as Afeni was, but Afeni was very effective in cross-examination of those undercover agents during trial, and I think that had a very significant impact on the jury, and I think it was, Afeni had a little bit of that actress in her, and she was able to play it to the bus, girlfriend was good. And she brought Yedwa Sudan to stuttering. The guy couldn't. I mean, what was he gonna say? You see what I'm saying? And she let him.
Cool part, like Jamal Joseph is narrating this part where she's saying, so when you were teaching adolescent boys to slit throats with a bayonet, were you a cop or a panther? Were you an undercover cop in that moment, or when you were like,
she was great. She was great, and I think it had a significant impact on the jury,
So, real quick, so she's very it comes up in the series. Now I'm starting to conflate things, looking at stuff at the same time, more or less, or overlapping. But in either in the series or in the Jasmine Guy book or both, Afeni is very self-critical about her drug use. And mentions, and honestly, I read it like 3 times. I'm not entirely clear if in the Guy book she's saying during this part of the trial she's high, but she talks about being in court and objecting and conducting herself in court on these pills she describes as sunshine. And a few minutes ago, you said something to the effect of that a lot of her behavior could be described as the actions of a crackhead. And I did want you to, if you could elaborate on it, because
Well, you know, I'm not saying
my own personal experience and bias is a little bit, but I just wanted to, if you could maybe elaborate a little bit on that, and you know,
that could be misconstrued.
Right.
You know, because I'm not talking about this period during the trial that she was that way. You see what I'm saying? I'm talking about much later. You know, when you know, because she was, you know, she was untrustworthy. She was stealing from comrades, you know, for her habit and stuff, things that, you know, crackheads do. But during trial, I mean, as far as I knew, during trial, and I was around her a lot, damn near 24/7. During the trial, she wasn't like that. You know, she didn't, I mean, other than smoke some weed like we all did at the time, you know, she wasn't, you know, and what we need to understand, what was Yellow Sunshine back then. You know, you had a song by Donovan called Sunshine Superman. I don't know if you remember that. Sunshine Superman. Go look it up. Sunshine Superman. Got a hold on me? Yeah, Sunshine Superman. Sunshine was a form of acid that was very popular back then. Yeah. And everybody used to, you know, on the weekends trip with some sunshine or some Purple Haze. I mean, look at Jimi Hendrix' song, Purple Haze.
Mm-hmm.
Speaks for itself. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. But I don't think that Afeni exhibited that type of behavior during the whole course of the Panther 21 trial. I don't think so. I mean, she didn't exhibit any type of bizarre drug addictive behavior to me then, you know, but I do know afterwards, when I was in federal custody on the 21, on the Handshoe case and on my counterintelligence case, she was, you know, a full-blown drug addict by then. And a lot of the reports that were coming to me, and they were secondhand reports, they just wasn't firsthand knowledge. They were secondhand reports about her unreliability, stealing people's money and going into the, you know, stuff like that. Petty things the drug addicts do, you know. But like I said, these were unverified. Basically, I can't say that I saw any of this. You know, I was just informed about it.
No, I was, yeah. And again, I'm not entirely. She's definitely talking about during the 60s and 70s at one point in the book, when obviously we're talking about the sunshine part, but it wasn't clear.
This is before the part?
No. She's talking in the Jasmine Guy book. She's talking about while she's in the Panthers, while during, and I think it's during the Panther 21 trial. The book it's more of a conversational style, and they kind of go back and forth. But it's in the section where she's talking about the Panther 21 and the trial, and she's definitely talking about being in the court, because she makes the point that she's objecting in the court while on this. And she said the pill didn't actually make her. She mentions your point about it being LSD, but she doesn't fully hallucinate with it. But it just made her sort of, I guess, kind of calm and I don't know.
Well, I mean,
but you know,
we learned back then too, that with acid back then, you know, that the frame of mind you went on the trip with was the frame of mind that your trip took. You know, so and if you went into it like
that, wisdom carries well into the 21st century.
Huh?
I was saying that wisdom carries well into the 21st century.
Absolutely. You know, and everybody knows the properties of hallucinogens now, you know, and how they impact on us and our behavior. And, you know, we know, I mean, I don't know if you know personally, but I've known dope fiends who are completely functional on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. They go to work, they have a job and everything, they raising their kids, but they're drug addicts. They got addiction. You see, of course, when we were growing up, addiction was a crime. It wasn't a mental or emotional state. It wasn't a physical thing. It was a crime. Now that white folks get addicted, you know, to fentanyl and hard drugs, it's a mental health problem. You see, and so
yeah. Sorry, yeah. I just wanted
to. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So if she was on, you know, on something during the trial, you know, it definitely didn't affect, in my view, her effectiveness in the courtroom.
No, clearly it didn't. Yeah. So I don't know how you are on time. We're a little an hour in, and in terms of this episode, we basically covered what I was hoping to get to. I did want to remind folks that and in this one I've put more links if because it did kind of get to feel like in some of the comments, not many, that folks were a little unfamiliar with Dhoruba and to a less important extent unfamiliar with our conversations over the years and a little bit of my own work. So there's a whole bunch of links in the show description. And we know that you have more coming out about your. There is one other question that I did have for you, specific to Afeni, is that in the Jasmine Guy book, this doesn't come up in the series. She mentions, and I just because of either my own memory or just blind spots in what I don't know. She mentions not wanting to be supportive of a book that I remember was a major impact on me at one point, but the Look for Me in the Whirlwind book. She speaks negatively about the book but doesn't go into detail because it's sort of cut off. Jasmine talks about trying to get her to talk about it and wanting her to talk about it, but it doesn't really, but she just says, I wasn't cooperative. Is this related to just the history we've already talked a little bit about, or was there something new?
I think it is. Again, it goes to her personality. You see, Afeni, people don't want to accept this, but like I said, Afeni, she knew how to manipulate. She knew how to manipulate people, especially men's feelings and emotions. She knew how to do that very effectively. And when it worked in her behalf, it worked. And when it didn't, she had a problem with people. Now that's not to say that her whole life was about manipulation and opportunism. I don't know her whole life on that level, but I do know how she interacted with leadership and different folks. I mean, in the party, myself included. You see how she would do things, against against other people just to get brownie points with leadership, And I know people may think that that's an assessment that's petty, but it's true. And when it comes to the Panther 21, Looking for Me in the Whirlwind, you have to understand how that book was put together. It was simply a compilation in which we were all asked to write a little personal bio that would be put in the compilation while we were in prison. And we all wrote that bio separately. And I don't know if you see Afeni's bio in there. Do you see it?
No, well, first of all, I couldn't find my original copy, so I went and got a new Kindle copy, and I see that it's been updated. So they got newer stuff from you in there, from that came out well after the original version. So, and I don't see there's an excerpt from a talk that she gave in 2008, which was not in the original version that I once upon a time had, in which she does say something that I would have loved to been able to raise a question about, because she says that the mistake that the party made was that they gave up God, and I struggle with that personally, but yeah, but no, I don't. In that state. Yes, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
That statement assumes that in the beginning that the Black Panther Party was about God and that it was an evangelical movement. This tells you how scrambled up people get. Now, because it's Afeni Shakur says that, now it's a deep issue. But the party was never an evangelical messianic movement like the Nation of Islam. It was never that. So the point that I think she wants to make is that the Black Panther Party and the radical black movement in general had lacked a really serious spiritual center of gravity
that you need to win. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you see, and I approached that same dilemma in prison when I took my shahada and became Muslim. Mm-hmm. And I realized that in Islam, none of the things that we as revolutionaries in the Black Panther Party and the revolutionary movement and in the Pan-African movement believed about people's empowerment and about about people's right to self-determination and about fighting fighting oppression. None of that was contradicted by the Quran. You see, and it was told, in fact, in the Quran, it said, "O ye who believe, who will stand up for the oppressed and the exploited, if not but you?" Who will stand up for those who are oppressed and exploited if it ain't you? Because you're the best evolved of humankind. You enjoin the right and forbid the wrong. You tell me if that's in conflict with the Black Panther Party. Hell no. You see? So, and that's why I joined the Black Panther Party, by the way. And that's one of the reasons why I felt so inspired by that verse. Because I joined the Black Panther Party because I despised bullies, and I wanted to enjoin what was right, to oppose what was wrong. You see? And I think that's what Afeni meant. That all through this sojourn that we were going through, we were dealing with dialectics and historical materialism. We were dealing with facts. We was dealing with man's social being, how it determines his thinking. But what about the spirituality of human beings? And that helps us and causes us to endure all types of travails and indignities and still come up on top. How did Black people survive the bullwhip days if we didn't survive it together? With a spiritual center of gravity, understanding that we were human beings, that we were the best evolved of humankind, and that nobody could keep us down. How did we survive that? So she had a point, but I think the way she presented it was a little open to contradiction.
I just can't. I'm sort of stuck in my atheism at the moment, so I just had a certain reaction to seeing that again. But no, there's not much in there from her in this updated edition. And she says in the Jasmine Guy book that she felt, even coerced is not the right word, but she said, well, in fact, she says something to the effect that something was written on her behalf that she just put her name to, and then her unborn son. I'm sorry.
You're talking about written in her behalf in terms of I look for me in the whirlwind.
Yeah, there was a
And she's saying that what was written by her in the book really wasn't her. Is that what you're saying?
That one part, that is how it read to me. I'm gonna find it, and now that I brought it up and I'm gonna get the clear quote, but.
Well, this is one of the reasons why I could understand why she didn't appreciate "Look for Me in the Whirlwind," because "Look for Me in the Whirlwind" was about each individual writing about their particular experiences in terms of how they became where they became, how they became what they became, and using the term of Marcus Garvey, look for me in the whirlwind. I use that term sometime today and say that if you look for me in the whirlwind, I'll be gone. And I think that one of the resentments that Afeni had is that Afeni really had nothing to say. She had nothing to say, no analysis of any of that stuff back then at that particular point. And so when people asked her to write something in this book, what was she going to say?
Well, this is what she said. She says, "First, let me tell you that this book was not my idea at all. As a matter of fact, I was hardly cooperative. But I suppose that one day you're going to wonder about all of this mess that's going on now. And I just had to make sure you understand a few things." So this is talk about she's writing to what she wrote to her unborn son, which I don't see in this most recent version. I'm not really, anyway.
No, that's not the most recent version.
Yeah.
The most recent version was rewritten a few years ago. And if you notice, I have a piece in there. I think I'm being interviewed in Africa. Is that it? Or
no, you had a piece in there you had a piece in this new one that I feel like you had published on my site first, but
yeah. I know there was a piece in there. There was stuff in there, but I was confusing that with Still Black, Still Strong, which was re-edited, and then I did a little.
Oh, right. Am I doing that? maybe I'm doing, you know what? I might be doing the same thing.
What?
Conflating Whirlwind with Still Black, Still Strong. I might be doing the same thing.
Well, I could understand if Afeni not was Still Black, Still Strong.
Right. But by the way, this was the part I was looking for, just in terms of what she said about the Whirlwind. She said, I wasn't very cooperative, and right there at the back of the book, the letter to them board was the one concession. They had to print this letter if I was to participate. I read it last night, but I almost missed it because they buried it in that letter you all wrote to Judge Murtaugh. You mean the letter they wrote? They wouldn't let me participate, Afeni corrects me. Your name is on it, I persist.
She's a liar. She's a liar.
My name is
I know all of your Afeni aficionados there are not going to like what I'm saying. She's lying.
Let me just, okay. Well, this is last quote here. Just this last quote here. My name. Anything
that follows after this is a lie. You know, she was solicited. Everybody was solicited to write in the book. She just didn't have nothing to say. And she said, and because she didn't have anything to say, she basically said, you know, y'all write the book, you know, I'll write a comment, you understand, so the book can get published and let's keep it moving. She didn't have nothing to say. You see, okay, and so this is in the same keeping as she said that everybody just bounced on them and left them to face the music in trial. You see, she didn't tell you that she was down with everything from the beginning, and that she made a choice not to go, because she had gotten into an emotional relationship with someone while she was in prison, and she felt very strongly about that. And that's what she told me to my face. So y'all can talk about all y'all want to about how she felt like this and she felt like that. I'm telling you what the sister told me to her face, to my face, okay? Because there was a moment when we said, Afeni, are you coming or not? It wasn't like, oh, adios amigos, we see you, wouldn't want to be you, and we disappeared on them. It wasn't like that, you see? And she knows that. I mean, she knew that, you know? And anybody that was privy to those things. And there was a whole different level of portrayal there, too, that I haven't talked about. You know, even when we got to Canada and got to the Canadian border, the level of betrayal that proceeded from that point on from Huey's secretary, okay, who had made those arrangements. So that's one of the reasons why you see that when we were on trial, you know, there was a moment in the trial when the court called Algiers and talked to Eldridge Cleaver and asked to talk to Setaweo. And Setaweo got on the phone and browbeat the DA about how he was a lackey and a pig and all of this stuff. And then they asked him to pass the phone to Dhoruba and Jamal, okay? And Setaweo said that we're busy, we was doing something else, and never passed the phone to us. And the counterintelligence program then speculated whether we were in Algeria or whether we were still in the US. People don't know all of this shit, you see? But the fact is that on a certain level, we never made it to Algeria. We decided to stay here and fight. Because the way that Setaweo and the paperwork was done, we had to wait in Montreal for our paperwork to come through in order to proceed to the next level of the struggle. And I wasn't going to wait. I came back. Okay? No, I mean, nobody knows about that. Did Afeni know about that? I don't think so. But I do know that, so this is what I said, you know, like the brother said, you know, he doesn't know, you know, what Asada might think about this. Who wrote Asada's book? Did Asada write a book? There was an aunt that wrote the book. And her aunt didn't have any of the politics of the Black Panther Party and felt that her niece had gotten into with a bunch of criminals and thugs, and that her position had to be really explained because Asada wasn't about all of that. Now, I know ain't nobody gonna like that shit neither. But hey, I came on your show so people couldn't like shit. So now you gonna get now, you know.
Oh my God. So I mean
So
I'm
when
sorry,
we look
man.
at this,
That's yeah. Go ahead.
but you got people that got T-shirts that say Asada taught me, and they get this T-shirt based on the book that they read on Asada, right? And Asada didn't write the book. Her aunt did, and her aunt wrote it in a way to protect her niece. I know because I was there and talked to her aunt and her. So it didn't reflect on, and all that myth about how Asada was the soul of the Black Panther Party, of the Black Liberation Army, and you even had one knucklehead up there talking about that Asada was one of the founding members of the BLA and all of that stuff. I guess you could say that, literally, okay? But the fact of the matter is that Asada Shakur was a medical cadre. And she was studying nursing at City College University, and she was a medical cadre, okay. And Asada was a community worker on the upper Morningside Heights up there in Manhattan, and she came into the office. She was going to PE classes and all of this stuff, and she had a little medical expertise, and she had entree to the hospital because of her student status. So she was medical cadre, and when we went underground, she went underground as a medical cadre. You see, she didn't go underground as this firebrand, machine gun wielding heart and soul of the BLA. She went in as medical cadre. Now, the fact that she became prominent in everything has to do with how the repression came down on the BLA, who was repressed, who went to prison early, why they went to prison, where they went, who was killed, all of these things that nobody knows about. I mean, people know about them, but they know about them in these little compartmentalized versions, you see. and so, I mean, people just don't want to relate to the fact that you had many sisters in the party who were unsung heroes and heroines, who did all of the daily work and grime and did all of the gritty shit that macho men didn't want to do on the one hand. And on the other hand, there were sisters in the party, you understand, who did the best that they could with what they had. And they related to brothers in the party, whether it was psychological, emotional, or whatever the case may be. And like I said, and Jared, this can't be pointed out enough. I mean, from my perspective, we didn't survive the bullwhip days and slavery as intersectional men and women. We didn't survive. We survived that shit together, Black men and Black women. We survived these crackers together. We will whip these crackers' asses together. You see, all these folks could come in with all this stuff about we not recognizing this and we not recognizing that. When you talk about gender equality, you look at something like FRELIMO, you look at the PAIGC, you look at the armed liberation movements who had women on the front lines right next to men. When you talk about gender equality, you can't get no more equal than that. You see, and that's where your sexism meets its match, on the front line in confrontation with the enemy. You see, that's where we all prove our worth. You see, and we had comrades that were gay. We had comrades that were lesbian. We had comrades of all types of persuasions, but they were comrades first. You see. They were comrades first, and their sexual persuasion, or if they was gay or whatever the case may be, didn't influence my relationship to them and the enemy, because we had a clear demarcation line between ourselves and our enemies. And that's what's blurred today, Jared. There's no clear demarcation line between the enemies of African people and the people. We have all these knuckleheads, these on YouTube. We have what Kalanji says, we have internet militants, we have Instagram gangsters, and all of this stuff. We don't have a face-to-face relationship with our people in the masses and organization no more. It's all on TikTok. It's all on Instagram and Facebook. Perception has become reality until we could no longer distinguish reality from perceptions. So when we read a book like this well slick show comes out, it's like, damn, this is slick. And then some gray-haired Negro comes along, you understand, and dumps on, and everybody say I shitted on the program. It wasn't my program to shit on it. Plus, how do you know I ain't got diarrhea right now? Maybe I can't help myself. Maybe the movement that we talking about is a bowel movement. You see? So I'm just saying, man, that's one of the reasons why I agreed to deal with this with you, is because precisely I wasn't watching the movie. And you agree, say, oh, that's a good point. You see, so we proceeded from there. And I don't want to step on nobody's toes or smash the feet of clay of their idols or do none of this stuff, but it is what it is, what H. Rap Brown, Jamil Alameen said, and I keep quoting them to this day. All that's not real is camouflage, bro. And if you're going to take a documentary in the accounts of people's lives, in isolation from the reality of their social being, then that's on you. You can't blame it on someone who says, well, that's not quite how it went down. You see what I'm saying? And then you the bad guy. I think you had a program called, I Hate What I Like or whatever. You had a whole section of haters coming.
We had the hate awards, yeah. We waiting to do another one. Yeah. Yeah,
the hater awards, and you can nominate me, man.
No. Well, we'll see. I don't know. Well, we'll see, because I'm not going to be involved with the next one personally. So I've been replaced.
Because you're going to be a prime candidate on that.
because I've been. I don't hate hard enough to be part of the crew anymore. So I've been replaced. So people have to stay tuned for future updates on.
Oh, you don't be
I've been bounced.
Liberal now.
Yeah, they threw me out, D. I got thrown out. So it'll be hosted here. Yeah, but all I got is the platform to offer the hate awards.
But you got Geechee, you got your homeboy Geechee, and they ready for this, man.
Between Geechee and Diallo, they do plenty. But I did want to, but again, just to restate for me, and then it's up to you. We can either wrap. I haven't been in the chat at all. If you want to take any questions, I don't know if you want to do that, or we can just wrap. But I just wanted to restate again that for me, to your point, these series are becoming ever more sophisticated in their presentation of these histories, of the stealth history that you talk about. So that's why your commentary and writing on the stealth history is linked in the show description. Many of our other interviews are linked, and I even put one that Brother TJ hosted, because I think it's important, as someone put to me earlier, that people see you not just talking to me, but be reminded of what it looks like when you're in dialogue with your comrades. The women and men that you struggled with. I'll add the soldier stories stuff so that people can be reminded of what it looked like to see Blood McCreary in a conversation with you and your comrades about this history, and not just an excerpt that diminishes that history in this series. Because to me, that's the point. When anybody in these commercial product spaces says Panthers, New York 21, Black Power, all that, my first thought is, here's another excuse to get D back on here to invite a broader discussion of that history. So we don't have to talk specifically about the product itself. I don't care if you don't see it. I'm more interested in your recitation of the history, and I think that analysis is priceless. So
well, I hope I clarified a few things this evening, and Yusuf won't jump on me for being a misogynist pig, and Sister Thandisizwe won't attack me for absenting women from the whole struggle, but.
And I love them to death, and I appreciate their critique.
I appreciate them too, man. And I really do. And I just want to say this, and I appreciate Yusuf and the sister, trying to bring my attention to, I could have been a little more, I could have been a little more detailed. I could have been a little more less dismissive in my commentaries and not give that impression, and I got that, and it's true, I could have been, but you know how you get when you get old.
Well,
man.
but I don't know. But look, I took a whole bunch of notes. I went back and watched our first interview, and I thought some of that criticism was to be fair, unfair. When I went back and reviewed it, everything that you were raising, it wasn't that you were just raising, for instance, a question about why the Hughes brother was putting this together now, or in all of this, and it wasn't that you were just trying to point to some conspiracy. You were raising a question that I think is important, which is what is the frame and what narrative is being upheld here by this version? Why would they pick somebody that doesn't have doesn't demonstrate, at least as far as I'm aware, any being well versed in this history, and who had beef with Pac at one point? Like, in other words, I think these are
look at Judas and the Black Messiah.
Wow.
Everybody knows the story of Judas, even non-Christians. So when you frame a documentary and you put Judas up there, the first thing everybody thinks is here's a betrayer, a snitch, a coward, someone who betrayed the Messiah. Okay? Then who is the Messiah? Fred Hampton.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So we tell the story from the perspective of Judas. And if you notice, Judas is battling with these crackers, when his handlers defending the Black Panther Party in some space, talking about how they're not really criminals, they're doing this and they're trying to do that, and that Hampton isn't really this. He's basically saying, okay, I'm on the payroll, but the people that I'm spying on, they're really not that bad. You see? And so why would we use Judas and the Black Messiah? And then you turn around at this particular point in time. Now, I don't know the Hughes brothers, and I don't know where they came from. I don't know anything about them other than what I've heard on the program. But you have to ask yourself, something that took 7 or 8 years in the making, and this stuff does take quite a few times to come out, comes out nice and slick. Each episode costs a couple of $1 million. We know that because this shit ain't cheap, and we know that the medium in the age of information technology is the message. So this medium is a goddamn message. Don't make like this medium is some objective documentary of Afeni and a son's love for his mama. It might be that in a bag of chips too. But the point is, why now? And when the sister got on there and said that, there's a dearth of Black heroines and Black sheroes for Black women in this generation to latch onto. So they latch onto opportunists like Elaine Brown. They latch onto all of these. I mean, what did you get dismissed from? When I said something very, very simple, that was true. That if it wasn't for George Jackson, you would have never heard of Angela Davis. She would have been just an Afro-wearing sister, you understand, who was affiliated with the Communist Party USA that Ronald Reagan probably talked about in terms of allowing Black radical thought on the university. Huh? You would have never heard of her if it wasn't for Jonathan and George. And then you turn around and ask, well, when was the last time, she mentioned Ruchelle McGee?
Well, just recently, as a matter of fact, and in part because of some loving criticism that came her way, but she mentioned him and Cop City, but I hear you, and a lot of people hear that. I just wanted to,
I'm just saying, I know people going to attack me.
I heard her say something.
So what I'm trying to say, this isn't just something trying to identify Black women only with Black male figures and shit. The fact is the fact. The history is the history. What, you going to rewrite history? Then it's stealth history.
Well, but again, my point was that in part also was that when I went back and reviewed our first, you were very praiseworthy of people like Diane Jenkins and Joan Bird, and those were two names you mentioned in particular. But then you mentioned others even in the text exchange that we had earlier.
Janet Sewell. Yeah.
Well, you
Frankie
mentioned Sophia
May.
Bakari, Diane Jenkins, Frankie May Adams. I mean, so in other words, it's and it wasn't to be disrespectful to Afeni. I didn't take it that way. It was to point out that for my interpretation is that they're and what I think is the slick thing, they're attempting. I actually feel like the disrespect should be turned back towards FX in this series, if anything. Because to me, they were far, particularly in episode 3, far more disrespectful, I think, of Afeni and her personal life than you were, and without the political context and analysis that you're bringing to it. And it's really only done, all of this for them is only done. So my thing with you is the exact reverse. I'm only using Pac to get to the BLA. They're only making reference to the New York 21 at all and Afeni at all, so they can get to Pac. And that's really that's where all of the gems and the detail and the substance that you bring in gets completely ignored and obliterated. So that was always my intent with this ongoing discussion with you around this series, is to say, well, just that they want to bring it to Pac, and no disrespect to Pac. I like Pac. I respect him, more than you do. But I want Pac's reference, and if Pac's gonna be brought into the discussion in the Panthers and Afeni, then we gotta have, I think, what you bring to the discussion. So that's
anyway. We got to dance without no steps, man. We've been doing this. I mean, this isn't the first time. I mean, when Eyes on the Prize came out, I remember I think I was in Nappaneck. Was I in Nappaneck? I think I was in Nappaneck or Comstock maybe. And this film crew came up. This guy, he applied to the Department of Corrections to do an interview. And they went through a whole bunch of changes, and they had this guy come. I forgot who it was. He came in and did an interview. So this was for Eyes on the Prize, and they had a section on the Black Panther Party, and they wanted to know, they wanted to interview me. So I talked to them. And then when I looked at Eyes on the Prize, I wasn't in it at all. I mean, it's all
I was
good.
going to say, this is news to me. I was like, wait a minute. Did I just not remember? Did I not recognize you back then? I was like, wait a minute.
No, man, I was but this is, I've been ex-nayed out of a lot of shit, so it's all good. Like I was telling somebody here a joke about Emancipation Day here in Africa, right, in Ghana. Ghana has a holiday called Emancipation Day, right? And Emancipation Day is supposed to recognize the emancipation of Africans from slavery based on the British passage of, the timeline was the British abolishment of slavery, right? Because Ghana was a British colony. So back then, I think this was like 90 something. I was really close with a minister here in Ghana. And so we used to sit down on Sundays. I used to go to his friend's house, who happened to be the head of Ghanaian security at that time, Kojo Chekata. And they would play chess. The minister and them, these two guys would be playing chess and drinking tea and talking shit. So I would be there, and me, I come from a whole different background. So I'd be talking a lot of smack about a whole lot of things. And they mentioned the fact that John Rawlings, who was the president then, it came back from Jamaica, and he was bowled over by this emancipation ceremony in Jamaica. They had Bob Marley up there and the musicians, and it was a national holiday. And he wanted to do something like that in Africa, in Ghana, the birthplace of Nkrumah, in order to bring the diaspora back. So why did he say that? So wheels started turning in my head. I started thinking of a flame, of an eternal flame burning on the Cape Coast, calling the Africans back to Africa. I went off, and I started talking about bringing runaway slaves back through the door, no return and shit. You see, so they was talking about that. Man, you must have been smoking too much of that shit, So, and the minister picked up on this. They presented it to JJ, and JJ said, that's not a bad idea. So he shot it to the Ministry of Tourism. And so this is a good way to get Africans back here, the Ministry of Tourism. So they started planning for this Emancipation Proclamation, right? So I was part of the planning committee. Now, the Ministry of what was the other one? Tourism, and there was another ministry. They wanted a piece of the pie, of the tourist pie. So they didn't want it all to go to Cape Coast. They wanted it to come to other parts of Africa, you understand, other parts of Ghana, where the captured slaves washed themselves in the river up, before they came here, before they went up through the door, no return. So everybody wanted a piece of this, okay? And when the day came, I had talked to Abu Badika, Sonny Carson, whose relative had been a runaway slave that was entombed in Brooklyn Navy Yard, and he had just discovered these remains. And there was this Jamaican sister whose relative had a Jamaican reggae show, and they had the bones of a runaway slave, maroon. And so we negotiated all of this, and we literally brought these bones back on the airplane with Sonny Carson, the Booba Dika. He came here with Leonard Jeffries, everybody. It's serious. People don't realize this shit. It's on film. And so they came here, you understand? And we brought the bones, and I'm jumping in the water with a fishing boat with this casket on my shoulder, wading up to the door of no return to the Mina Castle, passing the thing back through, right? And then I give this little address at the ceremony there at the castle. And then when they showed it on the tourist thing, about how the African diaspora was coming back to Africa, and this was the Ministry of Tourism and the Ministry of so-and-so, welcome back. My whole speech and my whole rap, everything was gone. It wasn't even in it. So when I tell people this story, they say, seriously? I say, yeah, man. Emancipation Day was basically my idea.
Wow. But what is funny, and I was just reminded of this, remember a couple of years ago when that truly dramatic film that was horrible about Pac came out, they did use your speech.
Oh, yeah, my entry.
Your intro to Manhattan when he was in New York.
You know how that came about? That came about because of Hakeem Green. Okay, now when I first got out of prison, Hakeem was with this group called Channel Live, a hip hop group.
Shout out to Hakeem. Yep, no question. Yep.
Yeah, that's my man. But he was also Hakeem and TJ and all of them were also in the campaign to free Black political prisoners and prisoners of war that myself and Thandisizwe Jones started, And so they used to come to all our political ed classes, Tayari, Hakeem, and so all that stuff really sunk in. I'm really proud of them young men, man. I'm really, really proud of them.
You should be. Shout out to both of them. Yeah, and I just heard from TJ today. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, shout out to all of them, man. And hopefully we get more involvement with them around here too. Yeah.
But anyway, so Hakeem said that it was Hakeem who got the idea, out there, and so, I mean, it's like Ras Baraka, right? When he was head of the NEA force in Newark, whenever he used to ask me to come and speak, and they'd be in front of the, City Hall, and they'd be demonstrating, I would always come and speak, because I felt that Ross and all of them, they were grassroots organizers, and they've always been on the front lines with folks. So I always felt a commitment to young brothers and sisters like that who were still struggling. And I never took the attitude that I was too big or, too busy, to hang out with them and try to get them, get their thing rolling, so. Yeah, it's just amazing. So that when I sat down and I looked at this day of return, I think I talked to you about that, right? About this day of return last year. About Rick Ross and and what's that guy named Boyce Watkins and all of these guys over here, talking about the day of return. Africans were from the diaspora returning, and it was only these, the head of Essence magazine. They was having these little elite meetings and stuff, talking about investment over here and investment in Africa. And I wrote this thing talking about how Ghanaians be really about pimping us. They will pimp your ass. Don't think Iceberg Slim got something on Ghanaians, on Africans. They will pimp black folks. And that's exactly what they was doing with all of these folks. So when the Meat Mills and all of these folks come over here and they're so happy to be in Africa, and black folks is coming over hugging trees and kissing the ground and shit, they know what this significance of this means to us, and they pimp us. I know, I done been there, did this. You see what I'm saying?
Oh man, there's nothing like being on the continent and hearing somebody call you brother, and then you got to catch yourself and be like, okay, what's why are you really calling me brother?
They call you brother, and then they call you American man. I said, man, dude, American man, who you calling me that? That's like a serious insult. And people say, well, why did he bug out like that? I be getting violent and shit. And people be saying, why? What's wrong with him? That was a compliment. It ain't no compliment to call. Man, you know who Americans are? Ask the native people who Americans are. Man.
Look, and I don't know. And I'm just out here, Dhoruba. I done lost all my melanin. I lost all my hair. I'm out here, and I was in Darien. In the blackest part of Panama a couple of years ago, little kids said, "Are you a gringo?" And I was like, I had the same kind of reaction. Don't you call? I was like, don't let this light skin fool you. I was like,
I'm telling you, they call me. They mumble a Bruni, and a Bruni literally means stranger. It just doesn't mean white.
Yeah,
man.
yeah, Muzungu, but all of that. So, yeah, man. I'm like, nah, man.
Who you calling a Bruni? And then you got young kids. Like about 15-year-old, talk about, and I'm 70-something years old, talk about what up, my nigga.
Yeah.
I say, yo, I will slap the shit out of you. Who you think you talking to? Would you talk to your grandfather, Chief Boogaloo, and say, what up, my nigga? Really? Really?
For me,
shows you. This is how our culture and how our music and how our style has been used by white supremacy and the European nation state to project our creativity and our culture as being solely an American product rather than the victim of Americanism.
That's it.
And so to me or you, that's an insult if you come to Africa, motherfucker calling you an Abruni. American man, who you talking to?
I had this kid in Tanzania. He told me, he said, I forgot how it come up, but he said to me, he said, you should have told me at the beginning that your father was black. He was like, I had you as straight Muzungu. And I was like, I know. That's why we got to get straight. We got to have these conversations. I got to get through to you. I got to have another level of direct conversation so we get clear. Because all this shit is just this Muzungu, this gringo shit. When I go to Central America, you better get the hell.
I've always said to these folks that a knucklehead, after they get information, the information is intelligence, but a knucklehead is a biological mutation in which the knuckle is substituted for the head. and as a consequence, you can't get through to a knucklehead.
Sometimes it's just
So I'm just saying, but anyway, man, I just appreciated the opportunity to clarify, but I just didn't want to, mince words and stuff around things like this for a generation that, like I tell folks, it doesn't look good for the home team. It really doesn't look good for the home team, and the home team is looking bad, man. I mean, with this generation that's coming up, man, we looking bad. You know, and I'm not saying that to say like, you know, we were the end all and be all of revolutionary fervor and development and all of that stuff, but shit then got progressively worse. And then when we look at stuff, you know, we don't have a real movement. And when we talk about a movement, we're not talking about uniformity. Here we're talking about unity. It doesn't have to be uniformity. Everybody plays a different role in this. We have academicians. What is their role in a liberation process? To produce liberators, to educate minds so that they would take up the struggle. That's their job. We don't ask them to get on the front line with a pitchfork or whatever, or a machine gun and start mowing down the enemy. That's not what academicians do. Okay, it's the same thing with they're a doctor. What does doctors do? What did the Cubans do with doctors when they sent them to Africa? So this is what I'm saying. Everybody got a role to play here, but when we try to act like our intersectional oppression trumps the oppression of an entire people and classes, that's when we start going off on the rails and start talking about shit like we're talking about now. Dumb shit. I mean, really dumb stuff. You know, well, I think you diminish the role of Afeni in the history of black people. Really? How is that? Y'all didn't even know the sister existed until these people put a movie out. You see? So, I mean, I remember the movie Black Panther. People was running around. I mean, people was actually going to the movie in Black Panther uniforms and outfits. Serious.
No, the Van Peebles version, I actually worked at a movie theater when that came out, and even then, as an unpoliticized youngin, I was like, this was ridiculous.
It was,
but you're right, there were people who were really like, this is. Even then, they were like what we would say in today's language, the young people, they're doing too much. Yeah,
they're grasping at straws, man, to verify our very existence, our humanity, our achievements. This is why we always talk about the first black this and the first black that. Oh, this is the first black person that white folks recognize had the credentials to be like them and achieve like them. Man, fuck these crap. Excuse my language. Man, listen.
Hey, it's always look. We got 2 more episodes of this series, so that's at least 2 more excuses I got to reach out to you, and I'm always looking for them. So I'll be.
You got to edit out profanity, though, man. I'm quite constantly criticized.
I'm not. We don't have editors like that. That's a lot of work. I'm not doing all of that. They just we will have to suffer through it. That's all.
It's like
it's always a pleasure, my man. Yeah, what she say?
Thandisizwe said, you know, Negro, you done lost your mind. I said, yeah.
And now that we've lost your face off the screen, I think that's the perfect way to say
I said, yeah, I lost my mind years ago in Africa. I'm still looking for it. Maybe I'll find it. I'm still looking for it. But she's right. I lost it a long time ago, so I'm still looking for it. So for those who,
we appreciate what we got left of it, because if this is you without a mind, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you're a high functioning, brainless dude. You know what I mean? So I appreciate you, and thanks to Thandisizwe for helping us get you here too. And we do have a standing request. We do have a standing request that she come on and talk about her political prisoner work at some point.
Man, you could be. Man, I don't know how that's gonna work. Thandisizwe,
I'll just put it out there. I know. I'm just putting it out there.
I brought it to her, man. I ain't about to get cussed out again.
Okay, all right, sorry. Well, I apologize to you and to her. I'm the messenger on this one too, my man. I'm
about to get cussed out again. You know,
right,
so
well, look.
But I know you should get May Jackson on there. I know you should get May Jackson on there because Afeni used to live with May Jackson, and she helped raise Tupac.
Sure. Look, I'm happy to talk to whoever. Like I said, I love doing this, and I love that we can have these conversations. Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Dhoruba, thank you very much once again, man. Stay safe, take care of yourself. We really appreciate you. Thank you very much for coming through.
I appreciate you too, man. Power to the people.
Power to the people. All right, everybody. Big shout out to Dhoruba. I mean, I didn't, I'll come back to the chat another time. I'm sure you all had a really good time out there today, and I appreciate you as well. And we'll continue the conversation. Thanks to everybody for coming through. Peace, like Fred Hampton used to say, if you're willing to fight for it. And like Dhoruba said, look for me in the whirlwind, I'll be gone. Catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like. Peace, everybody. Take good care.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.